India after independence 1947 onwards. The moment India achieved independence on the 15th of August 1947, it entered a phase of unprecedented challenges and monumental nation building. The new state had to manage the trauma of partition, ensure national integration, build a democratic political system, frame a constitution, and launch a plan for socio-economic development. These tasks were carried out under visionary leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and many others who laid the foundations of the Indian Republic. One of the first and most complex challenges was partition and its aftermath. Over 10 million people were displaced, and nearly 1 million were killed in communal riots. The government, under Nehru and Patel, had to manage refugee resettlement, communal harmony, and law and order. The division of assets with Pakistan, formation of two dominions, and communal tensions made this an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Gandhi's assassination in 1948 was a blow to India's moral core, highlighting the rising intensity of communal hatred. Simultaneously, national integration required the accession of over 560 princely states. Through diplomacy, pressure, and in some cases military action, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, as India's first Home Minister, ensured the integration of almost all states into the Indian Union. Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Kashmir posed special problems. Junagadh, a Muslim-ruled state with a Hindu population, was annexed after a plebiscite. Hyderabad, under the Nizam, was brought into the Union through Operation Polo in 1948. The most complex was Jammu and Kashmir, where the instrument of accession signed by Maharaja Hari Singh in 1947, following tribal invasion from Pakistan, made it part of India, but the issue remains contested internationally even today. The biggest democratic exercise post-independence was the framing of the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly, under Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as chairman of the drafting committee, created a document that guaranteed universal adult franchise, fundamental rights, secularism, federalism, and social justice. It was adopted on the 26th of November 1949 and enforced on the 26th of January 1950, making India a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. It enshrined equal rights for all citizens, abolished untouchability, recognized affirmative action, and laid the legal framework for democracy. The linguistic reorganization of states was another major step toward federal integration. Demands based on language had been growing, especially in South India. The death of Patti Sriramulu during a hunger strike for a separate Andhra state led to its creation in 1953. Subsequently, the States Reorganization Act of 1956 redrew state boundaries based on linguistic lines. This preserved linguistic identity while maintaining national unity. India's economic planning began with the establishment of the Planning Commission 1950 and the launch of the first five-year plan 1951-56. Nehru's model emphasized public sector growth, state-led industrialization, heavy industries, and self-reliance. The second five-year plan, based on Mahalanobis model, stressed rapid industrial growth. Land reforms were attempted to abolish zamindari, ensure tenancy rights, and land ceilings, though success varied across states. Community development programs were launched to uplift rural India. India also emphasized scientific and technical education, founding institutions like IITs, AIIMS, CSIR Labs, and ISRO, established in 1969. Foreign policy under Nehru emphasized non-alignment, positioning India as a leader of the newly decolonized world. India refused to align with either the USA or USSR, but championed peaceful coexistence, disarmament, and anti-colonial solidarity. India played a key role in the Bandung Conference 1955 and the formation of the NAM in 1961. However, its moral diplomacy faced a serious test during the 1962 war with China, which exposed India's military unpreparedness and led to national introspection. Post-Nehru, under Lal Bahadur Shastri, India saw the Indo-Pak War of 1965, resulting in the Tashkent Agreement 1966. His slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, became symbolic of India's agricultural and defense priorities. Under Indira Gandhi, India took decisive steps including bank nationalization 1969, abolition of privy purses, and led India to victory in the 1971 war with Pakistan, resulting in the creation of Bangladesh. However, her imposition of the emergency 1975-77 marked a dark period, with suspension of civil liberties, press censorship, and authoritarian rule. The post-emergency democratic revival reaffirmed the resilience of Indian democracy. India also faced significant internal challenges: communalism, Naxalite insurgency 1967 onwards, separatism in Punjab and Northeast, and communal riots. The state responded with both welfare schemes and strong state action. The Green Revolution, launched in the 1960s, transformed agriculture in Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, making India food secure, though it increased regional inequality. The 1980s saw the rise of identity politics, such as Mandal Commission implementation 1990 under VP Singh, which provided 27% reservation for OBCs, and Hindutva politics with the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, culminating in the Babri Masjid demolition in 1992. These changed the ideological landscape of Indian politics, polarizing debates on secularism and social justice. Liberalization of the economy in 1991, under P.V. Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh, marked a paradigm shift. India moved from a state-controlled economy to a market-oriented model, dismantling the license Raj, reducing import tariffs, and encouraging foreign investment. The reforms spurred growth, urbanization, and rise of a middle class, but also brought new challenges like inequality and jobless growth. India after independence has thus been a story of remarkable resilience and transformation, from a colonial economy to a rising power, from feudal structures to a constitutional democracy, and from a divided society to a federal republic that continues to evolve. Despite challenges, the commitment to democracy, pluralism, and development has defined post-independence India. Previous year CAS questions. Discuss the role of Sardar Patel in the integration of princely states. CAS 2020. Answer: Sardar Patel used diplomacy, persuasion, and force to integrate over 560 princely states. His strategic handling of Junagadh, Hyderabad, Operation Polo, and Kashmir ensured national unity. He is rightly called the Iron Man of India. Examine the significance of the linguistic reorganization of states. CAS 2018. Answer. The 1956 reorganization addressed regional aspirations by redrawing state boundaries along linguistic lines. It balanced unity and diversity, reduced regional unrest, and strengthened the federal structure. Analyze the causes and impact of the 1991 economic reforms. CAS 2021. Answer. Reforms were triggered by a balance of payments crisis. The 1991 reforms liberalized trade, dismantled licensing, opened FDI. They boosted growth and globalization but increased inequality and urban-rural gaps. Ready for the next topic? We can cover freedom movement in Kerala, post-1947 social movements, foreign policy, or whatever you need next. Just say the word, I'm with you from start to rank. You said, post. Independent consolidation and reorganization. ChatGPT said. Here is your maximally detailed, fully packed lecture on post-independent consolidation and reorganization in India, created post-independent consolidation and reorganization of India. The period following India's independence in 1947 was one of unparalleled complexity and nation-building urgency. The leadership faced a Herculean task of consolidating a fractured polity, integrating over 560 princely states, addressing the trauma of partition, and creating a coherent and functioning democratic state structure. This phase, often described as a second freedom struggle, was vital for ensuring unity, federal integrity, administrative coherence, and the democratic ethos of the newly born nation. One of the foremost challenges was the political integration of princely states. These semi-autonomous units had varying degrees of allegiance to the British Crown, and upon independence, they were given the option to join India, Pakistan, or remain independent. This posed a severe threat to the territorial and administrative unity of India. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, as the first Home Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, along with V.P. Menon, used a combination of persuasion, diplomacy, and strategic force to secure the accession of these states to the Indian Union. By 1949, almost all princely states, including those initially resistant like Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Kashmir, had been integrated. In Hyderabad, Patel launched Operation Polo, a military action in 1948 to suppress the Nizam's ambitions of independence and communal violence. Kashmir, a Hindu-ruled, Muslim-majority state, acceded to India after an invasion by tribal militias from Pakistan, but remains a sensitive region with complex political ramifications even today. Once the territorial integrity of India was secured, the next phase was administrative consolidation and political reorganization. The Indian Constitution, adopted in 1949 and enforced in 1950, provided the framework for this, establishing a federal structure, a strong central government, and a parliamentary democracy. A major instrument of consolidation was the abolition of privy purses and special privileges of princes by Indira Gandhi in 1971, removing the last symbolic remnants of feudal India. Another significant challenge was the linguistic and cultural diversity of India. Post-independence, there was a growing demand for states based on linguistic identity. This movement gained momentum with the death of Patti Sriramulu in 1952 during a hunger strike for a separate Andhra state, leading to its formation in 1953. This set a precedent for the States Reorganization Commission (SRC), established in 1953 under Faisal Ali, which recommended the reorganization of states along linguistic lines. The States Reorganization Act of 1956 reorganized the internal boundaries of India, leading to the formation of 14 states and 6 union territories. This act was a cornerstone in maintaining federal balance while recognizing regional and linguistic aspirations. Consolidation also required addressing separatist and regional movements that emerged in various parts of the country. In the Northeast, groups demanded autonomy or secession citing ethnic, linguistic, and cultural reasons. The government responded by creating special constitutional provisions, like Sixth Schedule, for tribal areas, and by carving out new states such as Nagaland, 1963, Meghalaya, 1972, Mizoram, 1987, and Arunachal Pradesh, 1987. In Punjab, demands for Sikh identity led to tensions, culminating in Operation Blue Star, 1984, and the assassination of Indira Gandhi, followed by anti-Sikh riots. The Kashmir insurgency in the 1990s, following the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits and rising militancy, posed a severe threat to national integrity, necessitating both military action and political engagement. Economic consolidation was another critical pillar. India's leadership initiated planned economic development through the Planning Commission and 5-year plans, aiming to reduce inequality, eradicate poverty, and build a self-reliant economy. Land reforms, though uneven in implementation, attempted to dismantle feudal agrarian structures. The nationalization of banks 1969 and key industries under Indira Gandhi was part of the effort to centralize economic control for national development. Green Revolution, beginning in the 1960s, ensured food security, while also exacerbating regional disparities. From a constitutional perspective, India strengthened its democracy through the conduct of regular elections, institutionalization of election commission, independent judiciary, and free press. However, events like the emergency 1975-77 tested the democratic fabric. The resilience shown by India in restoring democracy post-emergency reaffirmed the strength of its institutions. Administrative reorganization was also pursued to align governance structures with new realities. Zonal councils were formed to promote interstate cooperation, and Union Public Service Commission (UPSC) and state public service commissions ensured meritocratic administration. The idea of Panchayati Raj, initially suggested by the Balwantray Mehta Committee, 1957, became constitutional through the 73rd and 74th Amendments, 1992, marking a shift toward decentralization and grassroots empowerment. Cultural consolidation was pursued through the promotion of a secular state, protecting the rights of minorities, and recognizing the pluralistic heritage of India. The Constitution allowed citizens to practice any religion, and policies aimed to accommodate diverse identities within a unified national framework. The rise of identity-based politics in later years, especially with the growth of regional parties, transformed the nature of Indian federalism into a more cooperative and competitive model. The creation of new states in the 2000s, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Uttarakhand 2000 and Telangana 2014 reflected the continued responsiveness of Indian democracy to regional demands. These reorganizations were often driven by economic disparities and identity assertion rather than linguistic lines, showing the evolving nature of India's federal polity. In conclusion, post-independence consolidation and reorganization involved an intricate process of territorial integration, democratic institutionalization, economic centralization, administrative rationalization, and cultural accommodation. Despite multiple threats, communalism, regionalism, separatism, India remained a united, democratic republic largely because of the foundational efforts in the first 2 decades and the resilience of its people and institutions. It remains an ongoing process that continues to shape the destiny of the Indian Republic. Previous year CAS questions. Explain the significance of the States Reorganization Act, 1956, in the consolidation of India. CAS 2018. Answer. The Act addressed regional and linguistic demands while preserving national unity. It reorganized state boundaries along linguistic lines, creating 14 states and 6 UTs. This reduced regional unrest and strengthened India's federal fabric. Discuss the role of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel in integrating princely states into the Indian Union. CAS 2020 Answer. Patel used diplomacy, persuasion, and, when needed, military action to integrate over 560 princely states. His handling of Hyderabad, Junagadh, and Kashmir was critical in preserving India's territorial integrity. What were the major challenges faced by India immediately after independence? CAS 2021. Answer. Major challenges included managing partition violence, refugee rehabilitation, integrating princely states, economic underdevelopment, linguistic diversity, and building democratic institutions. Next up, I can help you with freedom movement in Kerala, Indian constitution and polity, or economic development post-1947, your choice. Independent India and her neighbors. India's geopolitical landscape, shaped by its central location in South Asia, has made its neighborhood policy critical to both domestic security and international diplomacy. Since independence, India has shared borders and complex relationships with Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, making regional diplomacy a cornerstone of its foreign policy, strategic autonomy, and regional stability. The first and most defining challenge to India's neighborhood relations came with Pakistan, born out of the partition of British India in 1947. The seeds of hostility were sown during the division of Punjab and Bengal, which triggered communal violence, the Kashmir dispute, and massive refugee migration. In 1947-48, Pakistan supported tribal militias to invade Kashmir, prompting Maharaja Hari Singh to sign the Instrument of Accession and leading to the First Indo-Pak War. The unmediated ceasefire in 1949 led to the creation of the Line of Control (LOC) but failed to resolve the issue. Subsequent wars in 1965 and 1971, the Kargil conflict 1999, and continuous cross-border terrorism have kept India-Pakistan relations tense. The 1971 war, leading to the creation of Bangladesh, was a diplomatic and military victory for India, changing South Asia's geopolitical balance. However, issues like terrorism, the status of Kashmir, water sharing, Indus Waters Treaty 1960, and diplomatic breakdowns post-2016, Uri attack, and 2019 Pulwama attack and Balakot airstrikes have made normalization elusive. India's relationship with China has evolved from idealistic cooperation to strategic competition. The early 1950s slogan, Hindi Chini Bye Bye, was shattered by the 1962 Sino-Indian War, rooted in disputes over Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh, then Nifa. India's granting of asylum to the Dalai Lama in 1959, and China's occupation of Aksai Chin, escalated tensions. The war exposed India's unpreparedness and led to a reassessment of defense policy. Tensions persisted, and though economic ties grew after 1991, border clashes recurred, notably in Doklam 2017 and Galwan Valley 2020. The line of actual control (LAC) remains undefined and contentious. China's growing influence in South Asia through its Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) and String of Pearls strategy, building infrastructure in Pakistan (CPEC), Sri Lanka (Hambantota), and Myanmar (Kyaukphyu Port), is viewed by India as encirclement, prompting countermeasures like Act East policy, Quad grouping with US, Japan, Australia, and regional connectivity projects like Chabahar Port in Iran. With Nepal, India has traditionally had deep cultural, religious, and economic ties, reinforced by the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. India supported Nepal's transition from monarchy to republic and remains its largest trading partner. However, relations have soured intermittently, particularly due to issues of border disputes, Kalapani Limpiadara, Madhesi grievances, and perceptions of Indian interference. Nepal's growing proximity to China has added strategic complexities. Yet, India remains a vital source of employment, trade, electricity, and infrastructure development for Nepal. Bhutan remains India's most trusted neighbor. The 1949 Treaty of Friendship, revised in 2007, allows Bhutan to consult India on external affairs without compromising sovereignty. India has supported Bhutan's economic development, hydropower projects, and democratic transition. Bhutan's refusal to join China's BRI and its alignment with India during the Doklam standoff, where Indian troops intervened to stop Chinese road building in a tri-junction area, demonstrates strong bilateral trust. With Bangladesh, relations have improved significantly since the Liberation War in 1971, when India provided military and humanitarian support, leading to the creation of Bangladesh from East Pakistan. Despite challenges in the 1980s and 1990s, ties were revived post-2009 under Sheikh Hasina. India and Bangladesh have resolved major issues including the Land Boundary Agreement, 2015, and partial progress on Teesta River water sharing. India has extended line of credit, connectivity projects, railways, buses, ports, and military cooperation. However, contentious issues like illegal immigration, NRC-CAA debates, and water sharing remain sensitive. India's engagement with Sri Lanka is driven by ethnic ties, Tamil population in both nations, security cooperation, and maritime strategy in the Indian Ocean. India intervened diplomatically and militarily during Sri Lanka's civil war with the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord 1987 and deployment of Indian Peacekeeping Force IPKF, which ended in failure due to political backlash and the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi by the LTTE in 1991. Post-war, India has supported reconstruction efforts, port development Colombo, King Santharai, and housing projects. However, China's increasing footprint, notably the Hambantota port leased to China for 99 years, has raised concerns of Chinese military presence near Indian waters. India's eastern engagement with Myanmar has historical, economic, and strategic underpinnings. India supported Myanmar's independence and maintains strong ties through connectivity projects like the India-Myanmar-Thailand Trilateral Highway and Kaladan Multimodal Transit Project. These enhance access to India's northeast and counter China's presence. Post-2021 military coup in Myanmar, India has taken a cautious stand, balancing democratic values with strategic interests, especially in controlling insurgency and cross-border terrorism in northeast India. India's neighborhood-first policy under Narendra Modi emphasized strengthening bilateral ties through high-level visits, soft diplomacy, regional trade, and infrastructure cooperation. Projects like SAARC satellite, COVID-19 vaccine diplomacy, and solar grid connectivity (ESA) reinforced India's leadership. However, SAARC has been ineffective due to Indo-Pak tensions, shifting India's focus to BIMSTEC, IORA, and ASEAN frameworks. In conclusion, India's post-independence relations with its neighbors have been a dynamic interplay of cooperation and conflict, geography and strategy, ideology and realpolitik. As China's presence rises and South Asia becomes increasingly contested, India's foreign policy must strike a balance between hard power, cultural diplomacy, regional integration, and global partnerships to ensure stability in its neighborhood. Previous year CAS questions. Discuss the evolution of India-China relations since independence. CAS 2019. Answer. India-China ties began with camaraderie post-1947 but deteriorated due to border disputes. The 1962 war was a turning point. Post-1990s saw economic cooperation but recurring border tensions. Doklam 2017, Galwan 2020 show strategic mistrust persists. Evaluate the impact of the creation of Bangladesh on Indo-Pak relations. CAS 2020. Answer. The 1971 war and the birth of Bangladesh dealt a strategic blow to Pakistan and enhanced India's regional stature. However, it intensified Pakistan's anti-India stance, leading to increased military buildup and support for cross-border terrorism. What are the main concerns in India's neighborhood policy? CAS 2021. Answer. Key concerns include China's growing influence, unresolved border disputes with Pakistan, Nepal, China, ethnic conflicts, political instability in neighbors, and maritime security. India balances these with aid, diplomacy, and strategic alliances. Let me know. Kerala history from 18th century, ChatGPT said. Kerala history from the 18th century onwards. The history of Kerala from the 18th century marks a period of intense political realignments, colonial interventions, socio-religious reform, nationalist awakening, and the eventual shaping of modern Kerala. The century began with the aftermath of internal feudal struggles and ended with Kerala's progressive political consolidation and unique social trajectory in independent India. In the early 18th century, Kerala's territory was divided among several small feudal states, most notably Travancore, Cochin, and the Malabar region under the Zamorans. The region witnessed the emergence of Marthandavarma (1729–1758) as the architect of modern Travancore. He crushed the Eduvidal Pilamar, a powerful feudal confederacy, centralized authority, and expanded Travancore by annexing neighboring territories such as Kayamkulam, Keelan, and Ambalapuja. His military modernization, use of European firearms, and diplomatic acumen set the foundation for a stable kingdom. He famously defeated the Dutch at the Battle of Callakal, 1741, making it one of the first major Asian victories over a European colonial force. He also entered into the Travancore-Dutch Treaty, 1753, and relied on the support of Raja Kesavadas, his Diwan. Marthandavarma's successor, Dharmaraja Karthika Thirunal Ramavarma, 1758–1798, continued administrative reforms and played a key role in sheltering those fleeing from Tipu Sultan's aggression in Malabar. His reign saw Travancore's alignment with the British East India Company through the subsidiary alliance system, which effectively marked the beginning of British paramountcy in Kerala. In the northern region, the Malabar coast bore the brunt of Mysorean invasion under Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, 1766–1792. The aggression involved forced conversions and lootings, triggering widespread resistance. The most significant opposition came from Kerala Varma Pazhassi Raja, known as the Lion of Kerala. He led a guerrilla war against both Mysorean and later British forces, utilizing the dense Wayanad forests as cover. After Tipu's defeat in the Third Anglo-Mysore War, 1792, Malabar was annexed by the British and became part of the Madras Presidency. The 19th century was marked by the firm consolidation of British rule, along with growing social unrest due to the exploitative land revenue system, caste oppression, and missionary intervention. The Mapilat Muslim revolts in Malabar, spanning from 1836 to 1921, were sparked by agrarian grievances and religious suppression. The 1921 Mapilla Rebellion, though initially anti-landlord, took a violent turn with communal overtones and was brutally suppressed by the British. Simultaneously, Kerala became a hotbed for social reform movements, challenging caste discrimination, untouchability, and gender inequality. In Travancore, Vaikom Satyagraha 1924–25 marked a significant anti-caste campaign for the rights of lower castes to use public roads near the Vaikom temple. This was supported by Mahatma Gandhi and spearheaded by leaders like T.K. Madhavan, K. Kelappan, and Periyar E.V. Ramasamy. This led to the Temple Entry Proclamation of 1936, issued by Chithira Thirunal Balaramavarma, allowing all Hindus to enter temples, a radical step in temple reform across India. Key figures of Kerala's social renaissance include Sri Narayana Guru, who preached the message of one caste, one religion, one God for man, and led the Aruvapuram Pratishta 1888, breaking Brahmin monopoly over religious rituals. He founded the SNDP Yogam 1903, which mobilized the Azava community for education and equality. Iyengali, a Dalit icon, organized the Sadhujana Parapalana Sangham 1907 and led the Kanulapilaya protest demanding educational rights. His efforts were instrumental in opening schools for Dalits and securing state-funded education. Meanwhile, the Christian community also saw reformist tendencies. Leaders like Kuriakose Elias Chavara established schools and printing presses, contributing to the educational uplift of marginalized sections. The Nair Service Society (NSS), founded by Minathu Pamanappan in 1914, and the Muslim Aikyas Sangham 1922, led by Vakam Abdul Qadir Maulavi, aimed at rejuvenating community solidarity through education and modern values. Kerala's political consciousness grew alongside social reform. The 20th century saw the rise of trade union movements, especially among Kuwar, Cashew, and plantation workers. The Communist Party of India (CPI) gained strength among the working class, particularly in Travancore and Malabar. The Punapra Vayalar Uprising, 1946, led by the Communists, was a landmark labor rebellion against the Travancore monarchy and the Dewan Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, who was attempting to declare Travancore as an independent state. His plan was thwarted by massive protests and opposition, leading to his resignation. Following independence in 1947, Travancore and Cochin were merged in 1949 to form Travancore-Cochin State, while Malabar remained under Madras Presidency. The demand for linguistic reorganization, led by the Aikya Kerala movement, resulted in the formation of the modern state of Kerala on 1 November 1956, combining Malabar, Travancore, and Cochin, with Tiruvananthapuram as its capital. Kerala made history by electing the first-ever communist government in the world through democratic means in 1957, led by EMS Namboodiripad. This government introduced land reforms, education. Kerala made history by electing the first-ever communist government in the world through democratic means in 1957, led by EMS Namboodiripad. This government introduced land reforms, education policies, and decentralization of power, which formed the foundation of Kerala's later achievements in human development indicators. Though the government was dismissed in 1959 through Article 356 liberation struggle, its legacy endured. The post-independence era witnessed Kerala's unique development model, focusing on healthcare, literacy, land distribution, and social justice. Despite economic challenges like unemployment and outmigration, particularly to the Gulf countries, Kerala achieved remarkable success in quality of life, often referred to as a Kerala model of development. Previous year CAS questions. Explain the significance of the Temple Entry Proclamation of 1936 in Kerala's social history. CAS 2018. Answer. It was a radical step by the Travancore king allowing all Hindus access to temples, breaking centuries of caste exclusion. It was a culmination of struggles like the Vaikom Satyagraha and showed Kerala's leadership in social reform. Evaluate the role of Marthandavarma in the modernization of Travancore. CAS 2019. Answer. Marthandavarma centralized power, defeated feudal lords, modernized the army, and defeated the Dutch at Kalakal. He laid the administrative and economic foundation of Travancore as a modern state. Discuss the causes and consequences of the Punapra Vayalar Uprising. CAS 2021. Answer. The uprising was driven by communist mobilization of workers against monarchical oppression and Sir C.P.'s plan for an independent Travancore. Its suppression led to political awareness, end of autocracy, and paved the way for integration into India. Let me know when you're ready for the next section, maybe constitutional development. Pre-independence socio-political movements in Kerala. The socio-political landscape of Kerala before independence was defined by a dynamic interplay between caste oppression, feudal dominance, colonial intrusion, and emergent reformist and nationalist ideologies. While political resistance was fragmented across princely states and British-administered Malabar, the cumulative result was a powerful mass awakening that set the stage for Kerala's post-independence progressive trajectory. These movements were not isolated, they evolved from social reform to political assertion, driven by leaders, workers, peasants, students, and oppressed castes. Kerala's social structure under feudalism and casteism was rigid and dehumanizing. The upper castes, mainly Namboothiri Brahmins and Nairs, enjoyed land and ritual authority, while lower castes such as Azavas, Pulayas, Parayas, and others suffered untouchability, exclusion from education, temple entry, and access to public space. The social movements emerged first as reformist campaigns, primarily focusing on dignity, access, and education, and later metamorphosed into mass political mobilizations with anti-colonial and anti-feudal agendas. Among the earliest organized reform movements was the Srinarayana Dharma Paripalana Yogam (SNDP), established in 1903 by Dr. Pramanabhan Palpu, with the spiritual inspiration of Srinarayana Guru. Guru's installation of a Shiva idol at Aruvapuram in 1888 challenged Brahminical religious monopoly. His dictum, one caste, one religion, one God for man, became the rallying cry for Azava upliftment, challenging ritual purity, and pushing for education, enterprise, and moral reform. The SNDP conducted temple entry agitations, legal battles for school admission, and fought for representation in government services. Iyengali, a Pulaya leader from Travancore, led organized Dalit resistance against caste-based exclusion. In 1904, he launched the first Dalit school in Kerala. He also led the Kanmula protest 1907 and formed the Sadhujana Paripalana Sangham, advocating for Dalit education and labor rights. Iyengali also formed agricultural labor unions and fought against discriminatory wages and forced labor systems. His defiance in riding a bullock cart on public roads, traditionally prohibited to Dalits, symbolized direct action against caste tyranny. In Malabar, which was under direct British rule, the Mappila Muslim community suffered from both agrarian exploitation and social marginalization. The Mappila uprisings 1836-1921 were initially spontaneous peasant revolts against the exploitative Jenny system landlordism. The 1921 Mappila Rebellion, however, became a full-blown anti-colonial insurgency. Though it had roots in agrarian discontent, it took on communal dimensions, leading to mass killings, martial law, and brutal British suppression. While politically controversial, it revealed the deep agrarian and communal fissures of the time. The Vaikom Satyagraha 1924-25 was the first major Gandhian-style agitation in Kerala, launched by T.K. Madhavan, K. Kelappan, and supported by Mahatma Gandhi. It demanded the right of lower castes to access roads around the Vaikom temple, then restricted by caste rules. This nonviolent struggle mobilized national attention, and although full temple entry wasn't granted immediately, it marked the beginning of caste barrier breakdown in Travancore and led to similar agitations elsewhere. This spirit culminated in the temple entry movement, leading to the historic Temple Entry Proclamation 1936 by the Travancore Maharaja, Chithira Thirunal Balarama, which allowed all Hindus to enter temples. This event was a watershed in the caste emancipation movement, making Travancore a model of progressive temple reform across India. The Nair Service Society (NSS), formed by Minathu Pamanabhan in 1914, aimed to modernize the Nair community through education, unity, and self-respect. Though initially conservative, the NSS later joined hands in broader anti-colonial movements and supported the temple entry movement. Similarly, Vakam Abdul Qadir Maulavi initiated Islamic reform and education revival through the Muslim Aikyas Sangham, 1922, and publications like Swadesh Abhimani. Politically, the Indian National Congress established its Kerala wing in 1921. Early Congress leaders like K. Kelappan, C. Kesavan, and Padam Thanupillai merged nationalism with social reform. The Salt Satyagraha reached Kerala in 1930, led by Kelappan from Calicut to Payanur. This action galvanized youth and rural participation, and led to mass arrests and British crackdowns. The Guruvayur Satyagraha, 1931-32, led by K. Kelappan and supported by Gandhi aimed at temple entry in Guruvayur and again exposed the caste rigidity in Malabar. Though the immediate demand was denied, the moral and political pressure led to eventual reforms. The communist movement emerged in the 1930s from the peasants' and workers' struggles, particularly in Kuar, cashew, and toddy industries. The Karshaka Sangham, 1935, and trade unions laid the foundation for the Communist Party of India's growth, first underground, then overt. They organized agitations for land reform, tenancy rights, and minimum wages, particularly in Malabar and southern Travancore. By the 1940s, the lines between social reform and political mobilization were blurred. Movements like the Punapura Vailar Uprising, 1946, led by communists and laborers in Travancore, was the culmination of pre-independence resistance against autocratic rule and economic oppression. It was a violent rebellion against Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, the Dewan of Travancore, who planned to keep Travancore independent post-British exit. Hundreds of workers died, but it compelled the monarchy to back down, leading to Travancore's merger with Indian Union. These pre-independence socio-political movements in Kerala were multi-layered and interlinked, driven by the oppressed, guided by reformers, and finally coalesced into the anti-colonial and pro-democratic transformation. They ensured that Kerala entered independence not just politically free, but socially awakened, setting the stage for the state's post-independence revolutionary changes in land reforms, education, and decentralization. Previous year CAS questions. Discuss the role of Iyengar in the upliftment of the depressed classes in Travancore. CAS 2018. Answer. Iyengar pioneered Dalit education, labor rights, and defied caste norms through public activism. He established schools, protested discriminatory laws, and organized agricultural workers, laying foundations for Dalit assertion in Kerala. Evaluate the significance of Vaikom Satyagraha in Kerala's caste reform movement. CAS 2019. Answer. It was Kerala's first Gandhian mass movement against untouchability. Though it didn't achieve full temple entry, it broke barriers around public roads, mobilized national leaders, and led to the later temple entry proclamation. What were the causes and outcomes of the 1921 Mappila Rebellion? CAS 2020. Answer. Rooted in agrarian discontent, religious persecution, and British injustice, the rebellion turned violent and communal. Though suppressed brutally, it exposed deep socio-economic divisions and highlighted the urgency of reform and representation. Let me know when you're ready for the next deep dive. Could be Indian Constitution, Indian Formation of Kerala State, a historical and political overview. The formation of the state of Kerala on the 1st of November 1956 was the result of complex historical processes, linguistic reorganization, and political mobilization that unified three distinct regions, Malabar, Travancore, and Cochin, into a single administrative unit for Malayalam-speaking people. This significant event in Indian federal history represented not just the culmination of geographical unification, but also the consolidation of a shared linguistic and cultural identity that had been fragmented under colonial rule and princely divisions for centuries. Before 1956, Kerala did not exist as a unified political entity. The region was split into Malabar, which was a district under the Madras Presidency, and the princely states of Travancore and Cochin, both of which had their own monarchs but were under British paramountcy. The linguistic and cultural unity of Malayalam speakers across these regions was overshadowed by political boundaries drawn by colonial authorities. After independence in 1947, the Indian Union undertook the integration of princely states. The first major step toward unification occurred in 1949, when Travancore and Cochin merged to form the Travancore-Cochin, Thiru-Kochi state under the leadership of Paravur T.K. Narayana Pillai as its first chief minister. However, this merger did not solve the issue of linguistic and regional imbalance. The demand for uniting all Malayalam-speaking regions under one administrative unit grew stronger through the Aikya Kerala movement, United Kerala movement. This movement, active since the 1920s and led by cultural and political icons like K. Kelappan, Padam Thanupillai, Sahodaran Ayappan, and C. Kesavan, aimed to bring together the Malayalam-speaking population from Malabar under Madras, Cochin, and Travancore into one state. The movement also advocated for social justice, equitable development, and end to feudal governance. Simultaneously, the national movement for linguistic states gained momentum across India, especially after the death of Patti Sriramulu during a fast for a separate Andhra state. This led to the formation of the States Reorganization Commission (SRC) in 1953, headed by Faisal Ali, with K. M. Panikkar and Radhanath Kunzru as members. Formation of the States Reorganization Commission (SRC) in 1953, headed by Faisal Ali, with K. M. Panikkar and Radhanath Kunzru as members. The commission recommended the reorganization of states based on linguistic and administrative coherence. In its report, the SRC noted the compelling case for a Malayalam-speaking state and proposed the unification of Travancore-Cochin with the Malabar district, while transferring Kasaragod Taluk from South Kannada district into the new state and Kanyakumari Tamil majority region of Travancore into Tamil Nadu. The States Reorganization Act of 1956 brought these recommendations into law. On the 1st of November 1956, the modern state of Kerala was officially formed by merging Travancore-Cochin state, excluding Tamil-speaking Kanyakumari and surrounding taluks. Malabar district, then under the Madras state. Kasaragod Taluk of South Kannada. The capital was designated as Tiruvananthapuram, and the state was divided into 5 districts initially: Trivandrum, Keelan, Aleppi, Kottayam, and Ernakulam. Padam Thanupillai became the first chief minister of unified Kerala in 1957, although E.M.S. Namboodiripad led the first elected government from the Communist Party of India, which created global history as the first democratically elected communist government. The formation of Kerala was not just a redrawing of boundaries, it brought together diverse socio-economic challenges. Malabar was underdeveloped compared to Travancore-Cochin, which had a legacy of progressive governance. Unifying these regions required harmonizing administrative systems, land tenure practices, legal frameworks, and language policies. Despite these challenges, the reorganization marked the beginning of Kerala's modern political journey, which would be shaped by land reforms, literacy movements, trade unionism, and democratic decentralization in the decades to follow. Kerala's formation was accompanied by widespread support from the people, especially the working class, reformists, and nationalist intelligentsia, who viewed the unification as a step toward social equity, regional parity, and cultural solidarity. The state's commitment to education, healthcare, and inclusive governance, which evolved in later years, was rooted in this foundation of political unity and linguistic identity. Previous year CAS questions. Discuss the role of the Aikya Kerala movement in the formation of Kerala state. CAS 2020. Answer. The movement led by reformers like K. Kelappan and Padamthanu Pillai demanded the unification of Malayalam-speaking regions. It mobilized public opinion, pressured political leaders, and laid the foundation for the 1956 formation of Kerala under the SRC's recommendations. What were the recommendations of the State's Reorganization Commission regarding Kerala? CAS 2021. Answer. The SRC recommended merging Travancore Cochin with Malabar and Kasaragod, while transferring Kanyakumari to Tamil Nadu. It emphasized linguistic homogeneity, administrative efficiency, and cultural unity. Examine the challenges faced after the formation of Kerala in 1956. In 1956. CAS 2019. Answer. Post-formation challenges included integrating different administrative systems, addressing regional disparities, especially underdeveloped Malabar, land reform inconsistencies, and creating a unified identity out of diverse political legacies. Let me know if you'd like the next topic, maybe land reforms in Kerala, political evolution post-1956, or Kerala model of development. Political parties in Kerala, historical evolution and contemporary structure. The political history of Kerala is unique in India due to its early democratic consciousness, deep roots in social reform, and a highly literate electorate that actively engages with ideologies. The state's political fabric is structured around coalition politics, with two dominant fronts, the Left Democratic Front (LDF), led by the Communist Party of India (Marxist), and the United Democratic Front (UDF), led by the Indian National Congress. The evolution of political parties in Kerala is intrinsically linked with the region's anti-caste movements, land struggles, trade unionism, and linguistic unification. The Indian National Congress was among the first political formations in Kerala, emerging in the early 20th century as part of the nationalist movement. Leaders such as K. Kelappan, Padamthanu Pillai, and C. Kesavan not only fought British colonialism but also challenged social inequalities. After independence and the formation of Travancore Cochin, the Congress held power but soon faced challenges from emerging class-based ideologies. The Communist Party of India (CPI) gained popularity among peasants and workers, particularly in Malabar, due to its involvement in anti-feudal agitations, trade union activism, and land reform struggles. The CPI made history by leading the first democratically elected communist government in the world in 1957, under EMS Namboodiripad, shortly after the formation of Kerala state. Though dismissed in 1959 due to the liberation struggle, Vimochana Samaram, the communists remained deeply entrenched in Kerala's politics. In 1964, due to ideological rifts over international communism, specifically the Soviet-China split, the CPI split, and the Communist Party of India (Marxist) CPI-M was formed. The CPI-M became the principal leftist force in Kerala, promoting agrarian reform, education for the masses, and decentralized governance. Together with the CPI and other minor left parties, it formed the Left Democratic Front (LDF). The LDF has championed policies like land redistribution, strong welfare systems, and people's planning and local governance. The Indian National Congress continued to be a key player post-independence, positioning itself as a centrist party. It later led the formation of the United Democratic Front (UDF) in the 1980s, a coalition of centrist and right-of-center regional parties, including the Indian Union Muslim League (IUML), Kerala Congress, various factions, and others. The UDF's strength lies in its broad social alliance, especially among minority communities and middle classes. The Congress-led UDF governed Kerala alternately with the LDF, embodying Kerala's bipolar political system. The IUML, representing a significant portion of the Muslim population, is one of the oldest minority-based parties in India. Though it originated from the All India Muslim League, the IUML reoriented its agenda towards secular democratic participation, focusing on educational and economic advancement of Muslims in Kerala. The IUML has remained a consistent partner in the UDF. The Kerala Congress, a party that primarily draws support from Christian farmers and middle-class agrarian interests in central Kerala, notably Kottayam and Idukki, has gone through multiple splits and mergers. Kerala Congress M, Kerala Congress J, and Kerala Congress B are some of its known variants. It has historically been a kingmaker party, often aligning with either UDF or LDF depending on the political climate. The Indian National Congress continued to be a key player post-independence, positioning itself as a centrist party. It later led the formation of the United Democratic Front (UDF) in the 1980s, a coalition of centrist and right-of-center regional parties, including the Indian Union Muslim League (IUML), Kerala Congress, various factions. It later led the formation of the United Democratic Front (UDF) in the 1980s, a coalition of centrist and right-of-center regional parties, including the Indian Union Muslim League (IUML), Kerala Congress, various factions, and others. The UDF's strength lies in its broad social alliance, especially among minority communities and middle classes. The Congress-led UDF governed Kerala alternately with the LDF, embodying Kerala's bipolar political system. The IUML, representing a significant portion of the Muslim population, is one of the oldest minority-based parties in India. Though it originated from the All India Muslim League, the IUML reoriented its agenda towards secular democratic participation, focusing on educational and economic advancement of Muslims in Kerala. The IUML has remained a consistent partner in the UDF. The Kerala Congress, a party that primarily draws support from Christian farmers and middle-class agrarian interests in central Kerala, notably Kottayam and Idukki, has gone through multiple splits and mergers. Kerala Congress M, Kerala Congress J, and Kerala Congress B are some of its known variants. It has historically been a kingmaker party, often aligning with either UDF or LDF depending on the political climate. In recent decades, the Bharatiya Janata Party (BJP) has tried to enter Kerala's bipolar space, but has had limited electoral success, mainly confined to Hindu nationalist rhetoric, Sabarimala issue mobilization, and isolated pockets in northern Kerala like Kasaragod. While the BJP's vote share has increased marginally, it has struggled to secure legislative seats, and Kerala remains one of the few Indian states where left liberal and secular discourse dominates electoral politics. Newer parties like the 2020 Kijakkambalam, a corporate-led initiative, have also emerged at the local governance level, claiming to offer corruption-free, technocratic governance, though their impact at the state level remains marginal. The alternating political pattern between the LDF and UDF, broken for the first time in 2021 when the LDF retained power consecutively, reflects Kerala's mature and critical electorate, which evaluates performance over mere sentiment. The 2021 victory under Pinarayi Vijayan was attributed to efficient pandemic handling, welfare governance, and developmental initiatives like the Life Mission, KFO and Kerala Fibre Optic Network, and KIIFB-funded infrastructure. Kerala's political culture is deeply intertwined with mass literacy, political awareness, and vibrant grassroots participation. Every major party operates with active cadre networks, strong media outreach, and community engagement. This participatory ethos is further enriched by Kerala's history of progressive reform, ensuring that issues like secularism, caste justice, education, and welfare remain central to party ideologies. Previous year caste questions. What were the reasons behind the success of the first communist government in Kerala in 1957? Caste 2018. Answer: the communists gained mass support through land struggles, trade unions, and literacy campaigns. The CPI's progressive agenda on education, tenancy reform, and governance drew large support, especially in Malabar, enabling EMS to form the first elected communist government. Explain the role of coalition politics in Kerala's governance model. Caste 2020. Answer: coalition politics, with LDF and UDF as dominant fronts, ensures inclusive governance, checks majoritarianism, and reflects Kerala's diverse social structure. It encourages alliance building among caste, class, and regional interest groups. How has the Indian Union Muslim League contributed to Kerala's political landscape? Caste 2022. Answer: IUML represents Muslim interests through democratic means, focusing on education and social upliftment. It is a stable UDF ally and a rare example of a religiously affiliated party upholding secular democratic values in the Indian context. Let me know which topic you'd like next. Land reform. Social and political movements in Kerala, from reforms to revolutionary politics. The history of Kerala is marked by a rich legacy of social reform and mass mobilization, evolving through anti-caste movements, nationalist struggles, peasant uprisings, labor agitations, and democratic movements. These movements played a critical role in shaping Kerala's progressive identity, high human development, and deeply rooted democratic culture. From the late 19th century onward, Kerala witnessed a unique confluence of social reformers, religious leaders, and political ideologues who challenged entrenched systems of caste, feudalism, and colonial exploitation. Movements in Kerala laid the foundations for the state's modern political and cultural consciousness. The early phase of social movements was dominated by anti-caste reformers who sought to dismantle Brahmanical dominance and empower the backward castes and Dalits. Sri Narayana Guru led the SNDP movement, advocating for social equality with the slogan, "One caste, one religion, one God for mankind." His efforts in temple entry, education, and moral upliftment inspired later reformers like Dr. Palpu and Kumaran Asan. The Sri Narayana Dharma Paripalana Yogam (SNDP) became the organized platform for Azava empowerment. Simultaneously, Iyengali, a Dalit leader, launched radical struggles like the Villavandi Samaram (1893) and Kudapalakaran Samaram, demanding rights to road access, education, and dignified labor for Pilayas. His formation of the Sadhujana Paripalana Sangham laid the foundation for Dalit assertion in Kerala. The Nair Service Society (NSS) under Manaf Pamanabhan, though a caste-based movement, aimed to modernize the Nair community and counter Brahmanical orthodoxy. Likewise, Christian missionary activity and Muslim education reformers like Vakam Mulavi contributed to Kerala's early literacy revolution. These movements collectively weakened caste barriers, expanded education, and created an emerging middle class with social awareness. Kerala's movements evolved into political consciousness during the freedom struggle, especially after the 1920s. Although Kerala's princely states were not under direct British rule, nationalist politics grew vigorously. In Travancore and Cochin, movements like the Vaikom Satyagraha (1924-25) challenged untouchability and the denial of temple entry. Supported by the Congress and Mahatma Gandhi, this marked Kerala's entry into mass civil resistance. It was followed by the Gravayar Satyagraha (1931-32) and the Temple Entry Proclamation of 1936 by Maharaja Chithira Thirunal, a landmark reform granting all castes the right to worship in temples. These movements had deep intersections with both social reform and political awakening. The Aikya Kerala movement, active since the 1920s, was a cultural and linguistic movement that later transformed into a political demand for the unification of Malayalam-speaking regions. It was supported by reformers and Congress leaders who envisioned a democratic state rooted in a shared language and culture. The movement influenced the state's Reorganization Commission (SRC) recommendations and culminated in the formation of Kerala State in 1956. Post-independence, Kerala witnessed revolutionary peasant and workers' movements, especially in Malabar and the hilly regions of Travancore, inspired by the communist ideology. The Karshaka peasant movements in the 1940s and 50s, led by the Communist Party, demanded land redistribution, tenant rights, and abolition of Jami landlord system. The Punapravayalar uprising, 1946, in Travancore, led by the communist-led trade unions, was a major anti-feudal and anti-monarchist insurrection brutally suppressed by the Dewan's forces. It later became a symbol of resistance and martyrdom in Kerala's political narrative. Another landmark agitation was the Vimochana Samaram liberation struggle of 1959, led by Congress, NSS, church groups, and sections of the upper castes against the first communist government of EMS Namboodiripad. Although ostensibly about education policy and school control, it was rooted in ideological resistance to communist reforms like land redistribution, secular education, and worker empowerment. It ended with the dismissal of the government under Article 356, setting a controversial precedent for central intervention. The student movements, led by organizations like KSU, Kerala Students' Union, and SFI, Students' Federation of India, have played a pivotal role in shaping the political consciousness of youth in Kerala. They were crucial in educational reforms, resisting authoritarian policies, and expanding access to university spaces. In recent decades, movements in Kerala have focused on environmental justice, gender rights, decentralization, and development debates. The Silent Valley Movement 1970s-80s became a turning point in Indian environmentalism, successfully halting a dam project and preserving biodiversity. The endosulfan protests in Kasaragod, the anti-sand mining agitations, and the development displacement protests in Kinnalur, or in Mula, and Visakhapatnam reflect the growing concern for sustainable development and local participation. Women's movements have also gained strength in Kerala's political discourse, demanding gender equity in employment, education, and public spaces. The Sabarimala Temple entry issue 2018 triggered statewide mobilization on both progressive and conservative lines, testing the constitutional values of equality and secularism. These movements reaffirm Kerala's vibrant civic culture and the dialectical engagement between tradition and modernity. Kerala's political and social movements, driven by class, caste, gender, environment, and identity politics, have been transformative in reshaping the state's institutions and social norms. Their success lies in the high political literacy, organizational networks, and historical continuity of reform and resistance. Previous year CAST questions. Discuss the significance of Vaikom Satyagraha in Kerala's socio-political transformation. CAST 2018. Answer. The Vaikom Satyagraha was the first organized anti-untouchability movement in Kerala. It mobilized national support, challenged caste oppression, and laid the groundwork for the Temple Entry Proclamation. It marked Kerala's integration into the wider freedom struggle and caste reform efforts. Analyze the causes and consequences of the Punapura Vailar uprising. CAST 2019. Answer. The uprising was caused by communist-led worker and peasant dissatisfaction against feudal oppression and the autocratic Dewan's rule in Travancore. Its suppression led to hundreds of deaths, but it catalyzed anti-monarchist sentiments and contributed to the integration of Travancore into the Indian Union. Evaluate the impact of post-independence social movements in shaping Kerala's development path. CAST 2021. Answer. Movements for land reform, decentralization, environmental protection, and gender justice have deeply influenced Kerala's model of inclusive development. Civic participation and democratic mobilization ensured that governance remained accountable and progressive. Want to go next into Kerala model of development, land reforms, or maybe women's movements in Kerala? Governments in Kerala, political chronology, ideological shifts, and administrative milestones. Since its formation on November 1, 1956, the state of Kerala has witnessed a politically vibrant and ideologically diverse journey, marked by regular changes in government, competitive coalition politics, and a deep-rooted democratic ethos. The governments of Kerala have alternated largely between two major coalitions, the Left Democratic Front (LDF) and the United Democratic Front (UDF). Each administration has contributed to Kerala's unique developmental trajectory, characterized by social welfare, participatory democracy, and progressive reforms. The first general elections in Kerala were held in 1957, resulting in the formation of the world's first democratically elected communist government. Led by EMS Namboodiripad of the Communist Party of India (CPI), the government initiated land reforms, educational regulation, and administrative modernization. However, the government faced intense opposition from various interest groups including the church, upper caste organizations, and the Congress Party, culminating in the Vimochana Samaram liberation struggle. This led to the dismissal of the EMS government in 1959 under Article 356, marking one of India's early instances of presidential rule imposed for political reasons. Following this, a series of short-lived coalition governments ruled Kerala in the 1960s, with the Congress, CPI, and Muslim League frequently reshaping alliances. The split in the Communist Party in 1964, which led to the formation of the Communist Party of India (Marxist CPI-M), profoundly altered Kerala's political landscape. The CPI-M emerged as the principal left force, forming governments either alone or in alliance with other left-leaning parties. The late 1970s and early 1980s saw the institutionalization of bipolar coalition politics, with the formation of UDF under Congress leadership and LDF under CPI-M. The UDF was a centrist-right coalition consisting of the Congress, IUML, Kerala Congress various factions, and others, while the LDF comprised CPI-M, CPI, RSP, and other left parties. From this point onward, Kerala politics began alternating between UDF and LDF, a pattern that persisted until the LDF's historic re-election in 2021. The governments led by the Indian National Congress, especially under leaders like K. Karunakaran, A.K. Antony, and Oommen Chandy, focused on infrastructure development, industrialization efforts, and decentralization policies, though often criticized for bureaucratic inertia and corruption scandals. Oommen Chandy's tenure 2011-2016 was marked by welfare schemes like Karnya Benevolent Fund, student assistance programs, and technological parks, but faced allegations like the solar scam, which weakened the UDF ahead of the 2016 elections. The LDF governments, particularly under E.K. Nayanar, longest-serving CM before 2016, and Pinarayi Vijayan, promoted land reform implementation, public health, education, and decentralized planning. Under E.K. Nayanar, the government launched campaigns like People's Planning Campaign, 1996, emphasizing local governance and participatory budgeting. The LDF's commitment to social equity, labor welfare, and pro-people legislation strengthened its support base among peasants, workers, and backward classes. The 2016-2021 LDF government under Pinarayi Vijayan marked a significant shift in Kerala's governance approach. It focused on infrastructure, digital governance, and crisis management, particularly during the 2018 floods and COVID-19 pandemic. Initiatives like Rebuild Kerala, Life Mission, KFON, broadband connectivity, and the revamp of public health systems received national and global recognition. Vijayan's administration also redefined political communication through centralized leadership and controlled media narratives. The 2021 re-election of LDF, breaking Kerala's historical pattern of alternate governments, was seen as a vote of confidence in the left's performance-oriented governance. The new ministry, with new faces and technocratic members, focused on digital education, welfare expansion, gender budgeting, and climate resilience. Under Pinarayi's second term, the government continued projects like Silverline semi-high-speed rail, controversial yet ambitious, and local innovation hubs, pushing Kerala into 21st-century policy arenas. Throughout these transitions, Kerala's governments have maintained stable democratic institutions, a secular public sphere, and active civil society engagement. The legislative assemblies in Kerala are known for high attendance, quality debates, and a robust committee system. Unlike many Indian states, Kerala governments rely heavily on public discourse and mass outreach, making governance transparent and participatory. Despite ideological differences, both UDF and LDF governments have contributed to Kerala's identity as a developmental outlier in India, where human development precedes GDP metrics. Successive governments have emphasized universal education, decentralized healthcare, land redistribution, and public sector strength, creating the so-called Kerala model of development. Previous year CAS questions. Evaluate the contributions of EMS Namboodirippad's government to Kerala's political evolution. CAS 2016. Answer. EMS's 1957 government laid the foundation of modern Kerala through land reforms, education policies, and administrative restructuring. Despite being dismissed in 1959, it inspired future governance models rooted in equity and decentralization. Analyze the reasons behind the 2021 re-election of the LDF government in Kerala. CAS 2022. Answer. The LDF was re-elected due to its efficient crisis management during COVID-19, strong welfare policies, infrastructural progress, and clean leadership image. Pinarayi Vijayan's centralized leadership and technocratic governance also resonated with the electorate. Discuss the role of coalition politics in ensuring stable governance in Kerala. CAS 2020. Answer. Coalition politics in Kerala balances diverse social interests, promotes inclusive governance, and prevents authoritarianism. The alternation between UDF and LDF ensures accountability and political renewal while reflecting Kerala's pluralistic society. Let me know if you'd like the next topic on Kerala's land reforms, local self-government. Landmark legislations and policies in Kerala, a historical and developmental framework. Kerala's post-independence history is marked by a series of progressive legislations and people-centric policies that have fundamentally transformed its social structure, economic model, and administrative outlook. These laws and policies reflect Kerala's unique political culture, where grassroots mobilization, leftist ideology, and democratic participation have driven state action. The emphasis has consistently been on social justice, land equity, welfare distribution, educational access, health infrastructure, and environmental sustainability. One of the earliest and most impactful legislative frameworks in Kerala was the Kerala Agrarian Relations Act of 1960, aimed at dismantling feudal land relations inherited from the colonial and princely regimes. While legal challenges prevented full implementation, it paved the way for the Kerala Land Reforms Act, 1963, amended in 1969, which stands as one of India's most radical land reforms. Spearheaded by EMS Namboodirippad's government, the act abolished tenancy, imposed land ceilings, and redistributed surplus land to the landless. This dramatically altered rural power structures, reduced landlordism, and enhanced social mobility for backward and Dalit communities, laying the foundation for Kerala's egalitarian development model. Another watershed legislative step was the Kerala Education Bill of 1957, introduced by the EMS government. Though the bill faced severe backlash from private school managements and was withheld by the President of India after referral, it signified a radical step to regulate education, improve teacher conditions, and bring private aided institutions under state control. While not implemented in full then, its spirit influenced later education policies and was partially realized through the Right to Education framework and state initiatives like General Education Protection Mission, 2017. Kerala's health outcomes owe much to policies like the Public Health Act, which enabled widespread establishment of primary health centers (PHCs), community health centers, and preventive health care programs. Legislations like the Kerala State Commission for Protection of Child Rights Act, 2006, the Mental Health Care Policy, 2013, and the Palliative Care Policy, 2008, highlight Kerala's pioneering role in inclusive, rights-based healthcare. The Kerala Panchayat Raj Act, 1994, and the Kerala Municipality Act, 1994 are considered milestones in India's decentralization history. Building on the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, Kerala became the first state to devolve power, finance, and functionaries to local bodies in a real sense. This led to the People's Planning Campaign, 1996, which institutionalized participatory governance and bottom-up planning. The act empowered Gram Panchayats to manage education, health, water, and infrastructure services, making Kerala a model for decentralization. Another path-breaking initiative was the Kerala State Environment Policy, 2009, and Haritha Kerala Mission, which promoted sustainable development, waste management, afforestation, and organic farming. These were supported legislatively by acts like the Kerala Conservation of Paddy Land and Wetland Act, 2008, which sought to prevent ecological degradation due to rampant urbanization. The Right to Service Act, 2012 is a more recent landmark aimed at improving government accountability and efficiency. It mandates time-bound delivery of public services, and penalizes delays. This was followed by digital governance measures, including the e-District project, Akshaya Centers, and the Kerala Fiber Optic Network (KFON) project under Pinarayi Vijayan's LDF government to ensure digital equity and internet access is a right. Welfare legislations have been central to Kerala's policy architecture. These include the Kerala Social Security Act, 2003, which unified numerous pension schemes, welfare fund acts for workers in the unorganized sector, and gender-inclusive laws like the Kerala Women's Commission Act, and the Kerala State Policy for Transgenders, 2015, the first such policy in India, ensuring employment, education, and healthcare rights for transgender persons. In the domain of housing and infrastructure, the Life Mission Livelihood, Inclusion and Financial Empowerment was initiated in 2016 to provide housing for all homeless people in Kerala. This policy has legislative backing in terms of budget allocations, planning, and land provisions. It integrates housing with social inclusion, rehabilitation, and sustainable construction. On anti-corruption and governance reform, Kerala adopted the Lok Ayukta Act, 1999, setting up an independent institution to examine grievances against public officials, though recent debates on its autonomy and scope have emerged. The Right to Information Act has also been widely implemented through active information officers and public transparency drives. In the environmental and disaster management sector, Kerala developed state-specific disaster management protocols, especially after the 2018 and 2019 floods, integrating them into urban planning, dam management, and resilient infrastructure building. Legislations around coastal regulation, mining restrictions, and waste treatment laws have been tightened post these events. The Kerala Startup Policy, first introduced in 2014 and revised periodically, supports youth entrepreneurship, innovation hubs, and tech incubators, contributing to Kerala's emergence as a digital economy hub. Likewise, the Kerala Industrial Policy focuses on MSMEs, cooperative sectors, and green enterprises. Thus, Kerala's legislative and policy landscape is defined by its commitment to equity, sustainability, public welfare, and decentralization. It reflects a consistent attempt to translate political will into legal frameworks that uplift marginalized communities, protect resources, and deliver services efficiently. Previous year CAS questions. Examine the impact of the Kerala Land Reforms Act on rural society. CAS 2016. Answer: The Act abolished tenancy and redistributed land, dismantling landlordism and empowering lower castes. It ensured rural equity, boosted agricultural productivity, and laid the foundation for social mobility in the Kerala model of development. Discuss the significance of the People's Planning Campaign in the context of the Kerala Panchayat Raj Act. CAS 2020. Answer: The campaign operationalized the 1994 Act by empowering local bodies with planning and financial authority. It institutionalized participatory governance, enabled community development, and made Kerala a pioneer in decentralized planning. How has the Life Mission contributed to social justice in Kerala? CAS 2022. Answer: Life Mission provides homes to the homeless, integrating social equity with infrastructure. It targets the poorest sections, including SC, ST, elderly, and single women, ensuring their dignified living and inclusion in mainstream development. Need a deep dive next on land reforms, People's Planning Campaign, or LDF versus UDF policies? Or should we move to the Kerala model of development? Just say the word, I'll build the next lecture like this one, packed and perfect. You've hit the free plan limit for GPT-4o. Responses will use another